The Iran-Israel proxy conflict, often referred to as the Iran-Israel proxy war or the Iran-Israel Cold War, is an ongoing struggle between Iran and Israel that takes place through various proxies. In the context of the Israeli-Lebanese conflict, Iran has lent its support to Lebanese Shia militias, particularly Hezbollah. During the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Iran has provided backing to Palestinian factions like Hamas. Conversely, Israel has supported Iranian opposition groups, such as the People's Mujahideen of Iran, conducted airstrikes against Iranian allies in Syria, and targeted Iranian nuclear scientists for assassination. Notably, in 2018, Israeli forces launched direct attacks on Iranian units in Syria. Historically, Iran and Israel maintained close relations based on their shared concerns about Arab powers, especially during the era of Imperial Iran and the implementation of the Periphery Doctrine. However, following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran severed official ties with Israel, although clandestine connections persisted during the subsequent Iran-Iraq War. Iran played a significant role in training and equipping Hezbollah during Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon, and continued to support Shia militias throughout Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon. Even before 1979, Iranian Islamists had provided material support to Palestinian groups, and after the revolution, Iran sought relationships with the Palestine Liberation Organization, as well as with Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Israel's confrontations with Hezbollah peaked in the 2006 war, while several conflicts with Palestinians occurred in the Gaza Strip during 2008 to 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021, and 2023-2024. The 1982 Lebanon War and the Israel-Hamas wars rank among the deadliest confrontations in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Several factors contribute to the Iran-Israel rivalry. Although Iran and Israel initially enjoyed cordial relations due to mutual threats, the dissolution of the USSR and the weakening of Iraq in the 1990s altered the landscape. Iranian Islamists have consistently advocated for the Palestinian cause, viewing them as oppressed. Analysts believe that by supporting Palestinians, Iran aims to gain acceptance among Sunni and Arab populations that dominate the Middle East. Ideologically, Iran aspires to replace Israel with a single-state solution, though it has also at times endorsed a two-state solution and has foreseen Israel's eventual demise. Conversely, Israel perceives Iran as an existential threat, accusing its regime of harboring genocidal ambitions. As a result, Israel has pursued sanctions and military measures to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Iranian Islamists have a long-standing history of support for the Palestinian cause. In 1949, Iranian Ayatollah Mahmoud Taleghani visited the West Bank and was deeply affected by the conditions faced by Palestinian refugees. Subsequently, he began advocating for the rights of Palestinians within Iran throughout the 1950s and 1960s. After the 1967 war, Taleghani initiated fundraising efforts, including zakat, to assist Palestinians. The Iranian government at that time was alarmed by these activities, with SAVAK documents suggesting that the regime believed the Iranian public was sympathetic to the Palestinian plight. Similarly, Ruhollah Khomeini promoted the Palestinian cause even before he became Iran's supreme leader in 1979, criticizing the Pahlavi dynasty for its ties with Israel, which he viewed as a supporter of that regime. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Khomeini's new government adopted a hostile stance towards Israel, perceiving it as a colonial outpost. Consequently, Iran withdrew its recognition of Israel, severing all diplomatic, commercial, and other ties, referring to the Israeli government as the Zionist regime and the territory as occupied Palestine. Despite the strained relations, Israel provided support to Iran during the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988. Throughout the conflict, Israel emerged as a key supplier of military equipment to Iran and also sent military instructors. Israel further supported Iran's war efforts by bombing Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in Operation Babylon, a facility deemed crucial to Iraq's nuclear weapons program. The 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon led to the evacuation of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, from the country. This created a security zone in southern Lebanon that temporarily benefited Israeli allies and reduced violent attacks on the civilian population in Galilee, which had experienced numerous casualties from PLO attacks in the 1970s. However, the brutal massacres carried out by Israeli proxies, such as the Maronite Lebanese forces and right-wing phalangists against Lebanese Shias, had lasting repercussions. These actions contributed to the rise of a homegrown Lebanese resistance movement within South Lebanon, which by the late 1990s posed a more significant strategic threat to Israel than the PLO had in the previous decade. Starting in the 1960s, many Iranians, both leftist and religious, had volunteered to fight against Israel with various Palestinian organizations, including the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Some of these volunteers, who had received training in Lebanon and Jordan, then returned to Iran to fight against the Shah. Yasser Arafat visited Iran on February 17, 1979, becoming the first foreign leader to visit the country after the Islamic Revolution. During Arafat's visit, Iran severed ties with Israel and expelled Israeli diplomats. The PLO found Iran's revolution inspiring, given that Khomeini, who had been exiled from his homeland, defeated a militarily powerful enemy supported by the U.S., something that the PLO thought it could replicate against Israel. On the other hand, Palestinians felt Arab nationalism was at a dead end. Arabs were defeated in the 1967 war, Jordan expelled the PLO in 1970, and Egypt recognized Israel in 1978. During the Iran hostage crisis, the PLO attempted to mediate with the Iranian students, but failed. In addition, secret documents were allegedly discovered at the U.S. Embassy detailing Israeli support for the Shah's regime. At the start of the Iran-Iraq War, Yasser Arafat tried to mediate between Saddam Hussein and Khomeini. Arafat feared the war would distract from the Palestinian cause. Arafat traveled personally on September 20, 1980, to Baghdad and Tehran, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Arafat eventually sided with Iraq during the war. Despite this, Iranian leaders kept a pro-Palestinian stance. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon. The leaders of the Lebanese Shia community appealed to Iran for help. Khomeini sent his defense minister and military leaders to Syria to assist. However, he eventually concluded that Iran could not fight a two-front war, given its ongoing war with Iraq. Despite Israeli success in eradicating PLO bases and partial withdrawal in 1985, the Israeli invasion had actually increased the severity of conflict with local Lebanese militias and resulted in the consolidation of several local Shia Muslim movements in Lebanon, including Hezbollah and Amal, from a previously unorganized guerrilla movement in the south. Over the years, military casualties of both sides grew higher as both parties used more modern weaponry and Hezbollah progressed in its tactics. Iran supplied the militant organization Hezbollah with substantial amounts of financial, training, weapons, explosives, political, diplomatic, and organizational aid while persuading Hezbollah to take action against Israel. Hezbollah's 1985 manifesto listed among its four main goals Israel's final departure from Lebanon as a prelude to its final obliteration. According to reports released in February 2010, Hezbollah received $400 million from Iran. By the early 1990s, Hezbollah, with support from Syria and Iran, emerged as the leading group and military power, monopolizing the directorship of the guerrilla activity in South Lebanon. Since the Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon and takeover of Hezbollah over the assets of the South Lebanon Army in May 2000, the conflict continued at low level, centered around Shaba Farms, a small region on the Hermon mountain slope. With the election of Iranian hardliner Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in 2005, relations between Iran and Israel became increasingly tense as the countries engaged in a series of proxy conflicts and covert operations against each other. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Iranian Revolutionary Guards were believed to have directly assisted Hezbollah fighters in their attacks on Israel. Multiple sources suggested that hundreds of Revolutionary Guard operatives participated in the firing of rockets into Israel during the war and secured Hezbollah's long-range missiles. Revolutionary Guard operatives were allegedly seen operating openly at Hezbollah outposts during the war. In addition, Revolutionary Guard operatives were alleged to have supervised Hezbollah's attack on the INS Hanit with a C-802 anti-ship missile. The attack severely damaged the warship and killed 4 crewmen. It is alleged that between 6 and 9 Revolutionary Guard operatives were killed by the Israeli military during the war. According to the Israeli media, their bodies were transferred to Syria and from there flown to Tehran. On 6 September 2007, the Israeli Air Force destroyed a suspected nuclear reactor in Syria, with 10 North Koreans reportedly killed. During and immediately after the Gaza war, the Israeli Air Force, with the assistance of Israeli commandos, was reported to have allegedly carried out 3 airstrikes against Iranian arms being smuggled to Hamas through Sudan, as Iran launched an intensive effort to supply Hamas with weapons and ammunition. Israel hinted that it was behind the attacks. 2 truck convoys were destroyed, and an arms-laden ship was sunk in the Red Sea. On 4 November 2009, Israel captured a ship in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, and its cargo of hundreds of tons of weapons, allegedly bound from Iran to Hezbollah. In 2010, a wave of assassinations targeting Iranian nuclear scientists began. The assassinations were widely believed to be the work of Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service. According to Iran and global media sources, the methods used to kill the scientists is reminiscent of the way Mossad had previously assassinated targets. The assassinations were alleged to be an attempt to stop Iran's nuclear program, or to ensure that it cannot recover following a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. In the first attack, particle physicist Masoud Ali Mohammadi was killed on 12 January 2010 when a booby-trapped motorcycle parked near his car exploded. On 12 October 2010, an explosion occurred at an IRGC military base near the city of Khorramabad, killing 18 soldiers. On 29 November 2010, 2 senior Iranian nuclear scientists, Majid Shahriari and Feridun Abbasi, were targeted by hitmen on motorcycles who attached bombs to their cars and detonated them from a distance. Shahriari was killed, while Abbasi was severely wounded. On 23 July 2011, Dariush Rezaianejad was shot dead in eastern Tehran. On 11 January 2012, Mostafa Ahmadi Roshan and his driver were killed by a bomb attached to their car from a motorcycle. In June 2010, Stuxnet, an advanced computer worm, was discovered. It is believed that it had been developed by US and Israel to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. In a study conducted by ISIS, it is estimated that Stuxnet might have damaged as many as 1,000 centrifuges, 10% of all installed, in the Natanz enrichment plant. Other computer viruses and malware, including Duke and Flame, were reportedly related to Stuxnet. Iran claims that its adversaries regularly engineer sales of faulty equipment and attacks by computer viruses to sabotage its nuclear program. On 15 March 2011, Israel seized a ship from Syria bringing Iranian weapons to Gaza. In addition, the Mossad was also suspected of being responsible for an explosion that reportedly damaged the nuclear facility at Isfahan. Iran denied that any explosion had occurred, but the Times reported damage to the nuclear plant based on satellite images and quoted Israeli intelligence sources as saying that the blast indeed targeted a nuclear site and was no accident. Hours after the blast took place, Hezbollah fired 2 rockets into northern Israel. The Israel Defense Forces reacted by firing 4 artillery shells at the area from where the launch originated. It was speculated that the attack was ordered by Iran and Syria as a warning to Israel. The Israeli attack was reported to have killed 7 people, including foreign nationals. Another 12 people were injured, of whom 7 later died in hospital. The Mossad was suspected of being behind an explosion at a Revolutionary Guard missile base in November 2011. The blast killed 17 Revolutionary Guard operatives, including General Hassan Moqaddam, described as a key figure in Iran's missile program. Israeli journalist Ron Ben Yishai wrote that several lower-ranked Iranian missile experts had probably been previously killed in several explosions at various sites. In response to Israeli covert operations, Iranian agents reportedly began trying to hit Israeli and Jewish targets. Potential targets were then placed on high alert. Yoram Cohen, the head of Shin Bet, claimed that 3 planned attacks in Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Thailand were thwarted at the last minute. On 11 October 2011, The United States claimed to have foiled an alleged Iranian plot that included bombing the Israeli and Saudi embassies in Washington, D.C. and Buenos Aires. On 13 February 2012, Israeli embassy staff in Georgia and India were targeted. In Georgia, a car bomb failed to explode near the embassy and was safely detonated by Georgian police. Indian police arrested a Delhi-based journalist in connection with February's car bomb, which injured 4 Israelis, including the wife of an Israeli diplomat. Journalist Saeed Mohammed Kazmi was arrested on 6 March 2012 after being in contact with a suspect that police believe might have stuck a magnetic bomb to the diplomat's car. It is said Kazmi was an Indian citizen who worked for an Iranian publication. On 18 July 2012, a bus carrying Israeli tourists in Bulgaria was destroyed in a bombing attack that killed 5 Israeli tourists and the Bulgarian driver, and injured 32 people. In November 2012, Israel reported that an Iranian ship was being loaded with rockets to be exported to countries within range of Israel, and that Israel will attack and destroy any shipment of arms. In January 2013, rumors were released that the Fordow fuel enrichment plant had been hit by an explosion. On 7 May 2013, residents of Tehran reported hearing 3 blasts in an area where Iran maintains its missile research and depots. Later, an Iranian website said the blasts occurred at a privately owned chemical factory. On 10 December, Hamas announced that they have resumed ties with Iran after a brief cutoff over the Syrian conflict. A court in Jerusalem has sentenced an Israeli man, Yitzhak Bergel, to 4.5 years in prison for offering to spy for Iran. Bergel belongs to the anti-Zionist Neturei Karta, an ultra-Orthodox Jewish sect which is vehemently opposed to the State of Israel's existence. On 5 March 2014, the Israeli Navy intercepted the Class C cargo ship. Israel stated Iran was using the vessel to smuggle dozens of long-range rockets to Gaza, including Syrian-manufactured M302 rockets. The operation, named Full Disclosure and carried out by Shiite 13 Special Forces, took place in the Red Sea, 1,500 kilometers away from Israel and some 160 kilometers from Port Sudan. Iranian state media reported that on 24 August 2014, IRGC had shot down an Israeli drone near Natanz fuel enrichment plant. The Israeli military did not comment on the reports. 2 workers were killed in an explosion that took place at a military explosives factory southeast of Tehran, near the suspected nuclear reactor in Parchin. In what seemed to be a response ordered by Iran, Hezbollah set off an explosive device on the border between Lebanon and the Israeli-controlled side of the Sheba farms, wounding 2 Israeli soldiers. Israel responded with artillery fire toward 2 Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. In 2017, Israeli intelligence discovered an Iranian base being built in Syria just 50 kilometers from the Israeli border. The assistance provided by Iran's IRGC Quds Force under General Qasem Soleimani, Hezbollah, and Russia to the Syrian government enabled Bashar al-Assad to emerge victorious from the war in 2017, which ensured that the worst-case scenario for Israel, a contiguous axis of resistance stretching from Iran and Iraq through Syria to the Lebanese-Israeli border, had been realized. Mossad Director Yossi Cohen said in 2018 that Israel's failure to prevent an Assad victory in Syria, together with Israel's failure to defeat Hezbollah in 2006, had meant that Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, should he be so minded, could drive his car from Tehran to Lebanon's border with Israel without being stopped, and the same route would be open to truckloads of rockets bound for Iran's main regional proxy, Hezbollah. On several occasions between 2013 and 2017, Israel reportedly carried out or supported attacks on Hezbollah and Iranian targets within Syrian territories or Lebanon. Israel systematically refused to comment on alleged targeting of Hezbollah and Ba'athist Syrian targets in Syrian territory. In 2015, suspected Hezbollah militants launched a retaliatory attack on Israeli forces in Sheba farms as a response to an Israeli airstrike in the Syrian Golan that killed Hezbollah and IRGC senior operatives. In March 2017, Syria launched anti-aircraft missiles towards the Israeli-controlled part of the Golan Heights, allegedly targeting Israeli IAF aircraft. which Syria claimed were on their way to attack targets in Palmyra in Syria. After the incident, the State of Israel stated it was targeting weapons shipments headed toward anti-Israeli forces, specifically Hezbollah, located in Lebanon. The Israel Defense Forces said that there were no Israeli casualties and that the 4 Hezbollah fighters fled back to Lebanon after being shot at. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, head of Iran's nuclear weapons program, was assassinated on 27 November 2020 in Absard. On November 7th, it was reported that Mossad thwarted multiple Iranian attacks on Israelis in Tanzania, Senegal, and Ghana. African authorities arrested 5 suspects. Iran has also attempted to strike Israel overseas and using cyber attacks. In February 2022, an Israeli attack against an Iranian base destroyed hundreds of drones, which prompted Iran to fire missiles on an American consulate in Erbil, Iraqi Kurdistan, the following month. An Iranian cyber attack on Israeli websites was also reported. In March 2022, Reuters reported that Israel was carrying out airstrikes against Iranian personnel and militias in Syria, backed by Iran. The report said that Israel seeks to prevent Iran from transferring weapons to Hezbollah. On May 22nd, Colonel Hassan Sayyad Kodai, a senior member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was shot dead in his car in Tehran. The 2023 Israel-Hamas war had a significant impact on diplomatic efforts. Speculation arose that Iran was trying to sabotage relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, with former head of research for Shin Bet Naomi Neumann saying the attack could have been timed in part due to Iran's hopes to scuttle efforts to normalize relations between Israel and its Sunni rival. On 9 October, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kana'ani denied claims of Tehran's involvement in Hamas's attack. On 12 October, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman discussed the Israel-Gaza situation with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi. On 13 October, Saudi Arabia criticized Israel for the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza and the attacks on defenseless civilians. On 14 October, Saudi Arabia suspended talks on the possible normalization of relations with Israel. In 2012, an NBC News story quoted 2 unnamed U.S. officials who stated that the MEK was financed, trained, and armed by Israel in killing Iranian nuclear scientists. The MEK denied this claim. According to a New Yorker report, members of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq received training in the U.S. and Israeli funding for their operations against the Iranian government. The MEK denied this claim. Russian foreign policy in the Middle East during the early 2000s, in light of the Iran-Israel proxy conflict. After 2001, the government of Vladimir Putin intensified Russia's involvement in the region, supporting Iran's nuclear programs and forgiving Syria 73% of its $13 billion debt. In a March 2007 brief titled, "Russia's New Middle Eastern Policy, Back to Bismarck?" by Ariel Cohen from the Institute for Contemporary Affairs, it was noted that Syria was supplying Hezbollah with Russian weapons. During the 2006 conflict, Israeli forces discovered Russian-made Kornet-E and Metis-M anti-tank systems in Hezbollah's possession in southern Lebanon. In response to allegations of arming terrorist groups, Russia announced in February 2007 that its military would inspect Syrian weapons storage facilities to prevent the arms from reaching unintended recipients. This development predictably strained the already deteriorating relationship between Russia and Israel. For several years, Russia has sought to engage in military cooperation with both Israel and Syria, but the degree of cooperation with each country has been inversely related. An increase in arms sales to Syria is likely to harm relations with Israel. The military collaboration between Russia and Syria has experienced various phases. Significant cooperation during the Soviet era, which largely ceased until 2005, and the current efforts by Russia to balance its relationships with both nations. However, Russia's recent shift toward the east suggests that Moscow may be willing to enter a new phase of military cooperation with Syria, even at the expense of its ties with Israel. Relations between Israel and Russia improved following Russia's military intervention in Syria in September 2015. From that point until July 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Vladimir Putin met 9 times. Before and shortly after the 2016 U.S. presidential election, Israel began lobbying the United States to negotiate a deal with Russia that would limit Iranian military presence in Syria in exchange for lifting U.S. sanctions against Russia. In 2019, Russia declined an Iranian request to purchase the S-400 missile defense system. Ruslan Pukov, head of the Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies in Moscow, remarked, "If Russia decides to provide Iran with the S-400, it will pose a direct challenge to Saudi Arabia and Israel, which would be against Russia's own national interests." As 2020 unfolded, tensions between Israel and Iran intensified, driven by a complex web of geopolitics, military posturing, and covert operations. The Iranian regime, emboldened by its nuclear ambitions, continued to support proxy groups across the Middle East, notably Hezbollah in Lebanon and various militias in Syria and Iraq. Israel, determined to prevent Iran from establishing a foothold near its borders, ramped up its airstrikes against Iranian positions in Syria, targeting weapon shipments intended for Hezbollah. In a dramatic turn of events, an Israeli cyber attack crippled Iran's nuclear facilities, setting back its nuclear program by several months. In retaliation, Iranian hackers launched attacks against Israeli civilian infrastructure, escalating the conflict into a digital battlefield. By early 2021, the situation reached a boiling point. Following the assassination of top Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November 2020, which Iran blamed on Israel, Iran vowed revenge. The Israeli government under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched a preemptive strike against an Iranian military base in Syria, killing several key commanders. In the summer, Iran's proxy forces began launching drone attacks on Israeli targets. One significant attack involved drones striking an oil refinery in Haifa, causing considerable damage and civilian casualties. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, responded with airstrikes across Syria and Lebanon, targeting Iranian military assets and Hezbollah strongholds. The conflict erupted into open war in March 2022, when a coordinated attack by Iranian-backed militias in Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon struck multiple locations in northern Israel. The assault resulted in the deaths of dozens of Israeli soldiers and civilians. In response, Israel declared war on Iran and its proxies, launching extensive military operations. Israel deployed ground forces into southern Lebanon, aiming to dismantle Hezbollah's military infrastructure. The IDF also intensified its air campaign, targeting Iranian military sites across Syria. Iran retaliated with missile strikes on Israeli military bases and cyber attacks that crippled critical services, plunging cities into chaos. As the war escalated, neighboring Arab states were drawn into the conflict. Some Gulf nations, while traditionally wary of Iran, began to support Israel, fearing Iranian expansionism. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain provided intelligence and logistical support, shifting the regional balance. In response to this alliance, Iran intensified its efforts to rally support among its allies. By 2023, the conflict had reached a stalemate, with both sides suffering significant casualties. Israel had succeeded in degrading Hezbollah's military capabilities, but the cost was high. The Iranian response included increased missile strikes and drone attacks targeting Israeli cities. In early 2024, a pivotal moment occurred when a series of peace talks mediated by neutral countries began in Oman. Representatives from Israel and Iran, both weary of the ongoing conflict, reluctantly agreed to a ceasefire. The negotiations focused on mutual security guarantees and the withdrawal of foreign militias from Syria and Lebanon. Despite initial resistance, a breakthrough occurred when both parties acknowledged the need to stabilize the region. The talks culminated in a landmark agreement in July 2024, which led to a significant reduction of military forces along the Israeli-Lebanese border and a framework for future diplomatic relations. As the dust settled, the fragile peace held, though underlying tensions remained. Iran continued to support its proxy groups, albeit with a reduced military presence. Israel, while vigilant, shifted its focus toward rebuilding and strengthening its economy. Both nations faced pressure from their respective populations to either continue the fight or pursue peace. The war had exacted a heavy toll, but the prospect of normalization offered a glimmer of hope. As 2024 came to a close, Israel and Iran entered a new chapter, one characterized by cautious engagement and the lingering shadows of conflict. Both countries recognized that lasting peace would require addressing fundamental grievances, but the road ahead remained fraught with challenges. The echoes of war still resonated, reminding them that the past could not easily be forgotten, and the future would depend on their willingness to embrace diplomacy over conflict.